Hello and welcome to There's No Business Like, a podcast where friends and industry colleagues explore topics and interview leaders in our industry of professional theatrical touring.
Hey y'all, welcome back to There's No Business Like, and I am Josh Benson here with my friends today, Brian.
Hey, Brian Zelmer from Bardavon Presents, and I'm in Poughkeepsie, New York today.
Katie.
Hi, everyone. Katie Miller with Michigan Maven Creative Associates coming to you from Muskegon, Michigan today.
And Kevin.
Kevin Maynard coming at you from Tallahassee with opening nights at Florida State University.
And Danielle couldn't join us for this recording, but she'll be back soon. Today, I'd like to start off with a question for you. If you were starting a rock band right now, what would you call it?
If I were going to name a rock band, I would do an all-female rock band called Moms Just Want to Have Fun, and we would play covers of female pop artists.
I have not put as much thought as Katie did into this because I don't know like how many people would be in my band or what it would be playing, but I'd probably call it like Handlebar Havoc or Kevin and the Tashes or some play off of Dapper or something. If it was a barbershop quartet, it'd be like the Dapper Troubadours. I don't know.
The Dapper Stashes. There you go.
Dapper Scoundrels. That's what I was thinking.
I can't come up with one that's as clever as Kevin's or for a new band, but I had been in bands before, and I remember the first band I was invited to be in was a metal band, and we didn't have a name, and everyone thought the name Knife would be cool, and there's now a band named Knife, but back then, believe it or not, there wasn't, but we were going to call it, sounding it out phonetically the way it's spelled, so it was going to be Kniffy, which is really dumb, and I love the fact that it's so dumb because now looking back, it makes me laugh.
That is so on brand. Totally on brand for Brian.
Are we sure that the current band Knife isn't pronounced Kniffy?
I came up with the title Punching Nothing. No idea.
Ooh, I like that.
And then on behalf of Danielle, she sent one in for the episode, and she would call her band Run, Brian, Run. So,
which really just sounds like a threat.
Should I be scared?
Yes.
I love that.
All right. Well, today I had the pleasure of interviewing Mark Ross and Erika Finley from Live on Stage and Live Arts and Attractions and Matt Davenport Productions. And you'll hear why I'm saying all of these different names here in this interview. Enjoy the interview. We'll talk to you on the backside.
I'm Erika Finley. I work for Live on Stage and Live Arts and Attractions.
And I'm Mark Ross, and I work for Live on Stage and Live Arts and Attractions.
Mark, Erika, thank you for joining us today on There's No Business Like. Let's start out by just telling me a little bit about how you got into the business to begin with. Mark, let's go ahead and start with you.
I guess it all started being in a band when I was a teenager. So I went from that. I was in a band in high school, and I was with members that were already out of high school. So it was kind of waiting on me and the drummer to get out of high school to do something. Already playing in clubs that I wasn't even old enough to get into. I was a year out of high school. We got signed to a small label in Nashville. We were the only rock act that they had. So here you have a rock and roll band in a country town. I didn't know anything about the business. I mean, absolutely nothing about the business. And everything that you can do wrong in the music business, I did at least once, sometimes twice. So I learned the hard way how the deals can go south and how you can be taken advantage of. So at that point, the band broke up, and you had to have something to fall back on.
Now, what kind of band was this?
It was a hard rock band. Believe it or not, I have no hair now, but we would probably be considered like a hair metal band.
Mark had longer hair than I did when he was 16. I'm not joking.
We'll need a picture of that in the comments whenever we post this.
We've got it.
But so yeah, my mother and just like any parent, hey, you need something to fall back on. But when you're in that vein, it's like, I don't want to go to college, Mom. I'm a rock star. I can't solve for X.
I am X, Mom.
I am X. That's good. That's good. Should have used that. So anyway, I decided to go back to school, and rude awakening. I ended up going to Belmont University and actually learn music business. And I didn't want to go and get a recording engineer degree or anything like that because I'd really gotten burned. So I'm going to know the business side. So I graduated with a bachelor's of business with a focus on music business and marketing. And I went from there to my first label. So I worked under the WIA umbrella, which is Warner Brothers, Elektra, and Atlantic at the time. And I was with a label called Asylum Records, which parent company was Elektra in New York. First country artist I worked with, because I was not a fan of country at the time, was George Jones. So that was my rude awakening into the country world of Nashville. So I went on from there to do public relations, some other things, and then Live on Stage found me when I was kind of in between some things, and I came on to start their publicity and press program, and then went into sales immediately after that. That's it in a nutshell.
And Erika, where did you get started in all of this?
So it's kind of a funny story, honestly, when you get down to like the grassroots of how I actually got into this industry. I was a psychology major in undergrad at Lindsey Wilson College, and just happened to go to an on-campus production. Got very, very immersed into the world of theater. I was at an audition in, I believe it was fall of 2015, and that's where I ended up meeting my boss, Matt Davenport. I was waiting on a friend to finish a callback and sitting at the bar drinking bourbon and watching basketball like a true Kentucky girl. This guy was sitting next to me, and he was like, I don't think I've ever seen someone like a girl at an arts conference willingly doing either of those things. I was like, I don't know. Well, he ended up remembering me because we sat there and talked for a little bit when I got to a spring audition, and put me on his callback list and brought me in. And he just so happened to be looking for a production stage manager for the General Jackson Showboat in Nashville. And so he brought me into the office in Nashville for an interview, and that's how I ended up working there. In fact, I actually started originally working for this company with our parent company, Matt Davenport Productions, as the production stage manager on the GJAC. From there was an opening within the office for Live on Stage. The girl that was there before me, handling all of the publicity and marketing, was leaving for another opportunity. Matt knew that I was interested in looking for full-time work versus just, the part-time gig on the GJAC. So I started working in I believe it was around June or July of 2016 for Live on Stage. I'm still currently the director of marketing for Live on Stage.
And when in that process did you decide to go back to get your master's degree from University of Kentucky?
That was kind of a pandemic decision. So I started looking at different pathways and whatnot. I considered so many different things in terms of going back to school. Completely different career paths. And then ultimately I just knew I don't want to work in a different industry. So I started talking to the director of my college theater program, and he was telling me about the new arts administration master's program at the University of Kentucky. And so I started looking into it and decided to apply and got accepted. And that really kind of sustained me, I think, in terms of getting through the pandemic and back into the industry as it came back to life after COVID. But in that process, it really gave me the education I think that I needed for this side of the business, because it is so different from just doing the marketing stuff that I've been doing. So stepping into the sales side of the business over the last couple of years since the pandemic, that arts admin master's degree definitely was very beneficial, and that the timing of it worked out really well.
All right, so let's get into the business itself. You've got Matt Davenport Productions, you've got Live on Stage, and then you've got Live Arts and Attractions. Two of those sound incredibly similar, but they aren't at all. Matt Davenport Productions is obviously a production company. They do the General Jackson Showboat. And what else is produced through
They
Matt
do
Davenport
a lot of
Productions?
theme parks
Yeah,
as
they've got
well.
Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. Over the last couple of years, they were actually providing bands for NCL ships.
And they also create experiences on some of those cruise ships too, like
light shows and laser
light shows, the silent disco thing.
And it's like an infrared technology. So the floor is broken up into quadrants, and you have headphones. And moving around, when you enter a different quadrant, it's like a different decade of music, but all of it's the tempo matches. So everybody's dancing to the same tempo, but you're listening to four different songs.
Different songs. So the funny thing is we tested all this on our sound stage, and it worked great, but we weren't using infrared, right? So when they got this stuff on the ship, it was their launch, and it was from where Germany somewhere is where it was getting out. It interfered with all the navigational stuff on the ship. The whole thing had to be retooled on how they worked it.
And so that's why it ended up shifting to the infrared.
To infrared, exactly.
That is so interesting.
Yeah. And they also do the shows at Holiday World in Indianapolis. I mean, not in Indianapolis, in
Santa Claus, Indiana.
Santa Claus, Indiana. And they've done some SeaWorld stuff, just a lot of that, And when I started, they were doing a lot of production touring shows. So that's going out, hiring the talent, writing the script, actually creating the costumes and the sets and getting that out on the road. Mm-hmm. But as we've evolved, that there's less need for that. But we still have scene shop, soundstage, rehearsal studios,
costume shop, everything.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Live Arts and Attractions is an agency.
Yes.
Which is under the overall umbrella of Matt Davenport Productions, but
Correct.
then its own company that focuses on national touring. What was the start of Live on Stage then?
Okay, so Matt Davenport came out of the Opryland theme park, which was one of the first, I believe it was the first theme park in the U.S. to actually feature live entertainment with live musicians and live everything. So a lot of stars came out of that. And Matt was heavily involved in that, not only as an artist, but as a producer. So when he broke away from Opryland, he was building his own touring shows that were playing in the community concert market. And we can talk a little bit about the community concerts. That was started, depending on what resources you're looking at, 1920 or 1927. I think the official record is 1927 is when it started. That's how old this market is. So he was touring in that market, and the person that was running it at the time, because community concerts ended up being run by CAMI, which is Columbia Artists Management Incorporated. They sold it in 1999. I'm probably going to get fact checked on this. And someone took that over. It completely ran it into the ground during the touring season. So you had artists out on the road that weren't getting paid, deposits that were paid from the presenters that they weren't getting back, and this person went on hiatus. It was a really, really bad time. Matt was already on the road with his production. Some of the area reps had broken away from that, came to Matt and said, you are the one to take this over. So with a lot of, talk with his wife and can we do this? He personally called every one of the active community concerts associations and said, I'm starting my own. We're going to do things different. And everything's going to be legit, up and up, and will you come with us? And a lot of them did. And that was around 2002 or so. And that's where Live on Stage was started.
Okay, so that's a great transition. Let's talk about Live on Stage, how that functions as a business, because in addition to being a production company and being an agency, you guys are also buyers.
Absolutely. So what Live on Stage does is it caters to that community concert association market. It's a way to bring world-class entertainment inexpensively to local communities. So we're not really in the markets of New York, Chicago, Los Angeles. We're in those tertiary markets that are just outside of major cities. So a lot of those are flyover states, or nobody goes to those states. So you've got to go to the major city to see that world-class entertainment. So if we can create a routing for those artists, we can cost effectively get them into those towns. So then the Community Concert Association will actually sell a season subscription and not hard ticket. And they're all pre-sold. So that's how the money flows.
Yeah, and I mean, the original creation of a Community Concert Association model and market was, to specifically bring classical music to these smaller towns, because, back in the 20s and 30s, you had to go, 2 and 3 hours to the nearest big city to see any form of live entertainment. And so this created a market for entertainers. It created work for entertainers to tour into these smaller towns, but also created an opportunity for smaller towns and people that live inside of them to not have to travel quite so far for live entertainment. It really grew to the point where I would argue there's probably more community concert associations, or at least there was at one point, across the country than there were these bigger venues.
Oh, there absolutely was.
Yeah, because they existed in these smaller towns. They didn't have the cost of living associated with the larger cities, and it created an opportunity, especially for artists that are starting to tour and beginning their careers. They were building a name for themselves across the country. And then that led them into touring in these bigger venues.
But you also had some pretty big names in there too for that time, just because they would take that to get from New York to L.A., like the Glenn Miller Orchestra. You had Van Cliburn. You had Elizabeth Von Trapp from the Von Trapp family. I mean, there were. I mean, this was a market people really wanted to get in and do this tour. But CAMI came out with a framework. So it's not like you were starting an association in some small town and just expecting them to know what to do. It was, this is how you budget, this is how you market, but we're talking 1927, 1930s, 1940s. But at its peak, I believe community concerts were pushing out somewhere around 1,800 concerts a year.
Wow.
And these are nonprofit
and
organizations.
Nonprofit. And a lot of them really got even more prominence or whatever from the reciprocity. So if you were in 30, 40 miles or something, you say, not only do you get all these shows for this price, but you can go over here and see all these shows. And in certain areas, that's still a really good marketing piece, especially on the East Coast and some
Texas
of the
areas.
and Midwest. New England used to be really good with that, but we've lost a lot of the New England. They just kind of dried up, and just it's all leadership. It's all leadership up there. But when I first started selling for Live on Stage in Nashua, New Hampshire, I remember the president told me when she was younger and going to these, she said, for one subscription price in that area right there, she could see 80 concerts a year.
Wow.
And that's what it is. It's about engaging the community and spreading the arts. And it's not about trying to shake down and get as much money for a ticket. And having the subscription base is a beautiful thing because you can bring in an artist that nobody's ever heard of before, but they're going to go see it because maybe they bought the ticket for the tribute show or something. So we can still try to include classical and try to include some of these things because the ultimate goal is to give them that experience.
Now, have you guys seen drop off and challenge within Live on Stage with the overall industry downtrend in subscriptions outside of the Broadway series? Have you seen the same thing tracking and trending across Live on Stage and affecting Live on Stage?
Absolutely. Because whenever you're looking at buying trends, you have to market to different people, different age groups in different ways. And that's part of what we do. And we'll get into what Live on Stage offers our clients as well. But if you go to anybody pretty much under 50 or whatever, is trying to get them to commit to buying a subscription for a show that's not going to start for almost 8 months to a year, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And that was originally the lifeblood of the subscription base. So how do you get around that? Because you're competing with a lot more things than they were in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
And it gets difficult, too, when you think about, because every year, in terms of the structure of Live on Stage, we assemble a roster of around 20 to 25 artists every year. And in that process, we have certain types of artists that we look for every single year, certain types of shows. We're very conscious and cognizant of who our audiences are in these Community Concert Association markets. And that gets a little bit challenging because, all of the towns are saying, we need to bring in younger people, but the problem is they're not always willing to take a risk to put like a show that's going to attract a younger audience on into their series because they only have, so much in terms of budget to be able to book their entire season.
Yeah.
So it becomes, and that's an industry-wide conversation right now, is how do you bring in these younger audiences without sacrificing your season ticket holders and your patrons.
An even bigger conversation on something like this where it's purely driven upon a subscription and not upon any individual ticket sales.
Right.
So what is it that you guys offer along with providing the programming? What is it that you guys offer to these non-for-profits that host the Live on Stage shows across the country?
A lot of people think that we're just a reseller or we're a typical agency, and we're not. And even the government sees us that way, and we found that out through COVID. They're like, oh, look, they don't even see us as an agency. They see us as a production company, even though we're not building the shows and putting them out like Matt Davenport Productions. So what we do is each town has their own area rep. So one of our staff of reps or whatever, they have their own person there. We offer them press and publicity. So for every show that they booked with us, Erika here will send out a press release, set up interviews if we can get it's all not only to promote the artist, but to promote the association.
Yeah, we put together like a cumulative list of media contacts, magazines, newspapers, radio stations, television stations, Chamber of Commerce, everything within their town, within around probably I'd say a 30 to 50 mile radius.
Depending on where they are.
Yeah. And then, send out a draft press release to the association to review and approve, and then send it out to all of those contacts for every concert.
And then in addition to that, we streamline all the tech writers. So when the tech writer comes in, there's a live on stage format that each tech writer's put in. So they know if we need a piano, we know exactly where to look. We know where to look for the hospitality. It's all very uniform. When they buy from us, it's one contract. So they have what's called a season contract. So they're not negotiating with the artist for every little thing. We do that on the front end and say, here's your price. So when they book 4, 5, 6, 7 concerts, it comes in one document. Everything is uniform. They just sign.
They don't have a website. We'll build one for them.
We build a website.
We have an online ticket sales system that.
That was key.
Yes.
Because the biggest thing is if you're going to sell a ticket, when you're selling to a certain demographic, how are they buying? And until, I don't know, 2010 or something, most of them were still sending out, sending it out. Now check this and send your check in. And who's going to do that under 60?
Yeah.
So you need to be online, but we don't know how to be online. That's scary. Well, we built one. It's called Live Concert Ticks.
Awesome.
And one of the biggest ones is the strategic planning. So we actually put together a whole sheet on how to do a strategic plan. And we've actually gone in person and done these. So it's all about creating a 2-year rolling plan for them, focusing on what we're trying to focus on. And those, we would go in person and do those, and it's somewhere around 6 to 8 hours long.
Well, we've done, social media, like handbooks. I mean, when you're working with people that are, in 65 plus, social media is a very scary, overwhelming thing, especially because it updates and changes the layout of any given app on any given day. But we've put together, this cumulative handbook, basically walking them through the basics of how to use social media for business purposes and how to, evaluate the analytics that it can provide, and just a lot of different types of services like that make what they do and what they're attempting to do in their communities a lot easier for them.
So there's a lot of hand holdings so you can see now what the difference between that and a typical agency would do.
Because these are all volunteer boards too.
Sure.
So that's a huge thing. Being able to provide a lot of these things that any other organization would have to hire people to do is a big benefit for all of them.
So let's touch on a couple of things there. One, you said that you streamline all of the tech writers. Whenever you streamline them into a different format, do you then have to go back and get that approved by the artist
Absolutely.
to make sure that they're still fine with their tech writer the way it is in a different format?
Absolutely. But we try to pre-qualify that before we even get into it. It's like, just know you're not getting the limo service and the 12 bottles of champagne backstage.
Yeah.
Joey in particular, Joey Boone, since he's come on board with our staff, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, Mark used to be responsible for all the tech writers amongst all of the other jobs that he does because he doesn't do enough. And Joey Boone's the one that takes care of that now, and he's got a music background, so he'll go back and forth with the artist, working on some of the things that they specifically need in their tech writer, and kind of just negotiating all of that with them, getting it approved. If any of the associations are having a hard time finding backline, Joey provides a lot of assistance with that. He makes the phone calls and finds the best pricing for them and he knows the type of instrumentation and equipment that's needed as well. So that's been a huge help to all of our associations.
And benefit to our clients as well. But I will say the backbone behind this whole thing. So you get all of these in. So we go and the reps will go out from about late August to November 1st. Everything happens in that period as far as visiting and talking to the clients. And all those come back in what we call booking reports. And they go to Laura Anderson, who's our director of operations. Now, when she gets all of those, she has to take the artist availability that she was given, work with a volunteer contact at an association that does not own the venue, to where they have to go to the venue and make sure that they have the time, and then make sure that that's all routed and it all makes sense for hundreds of concerts.
It's insane. I don't know how she does it.
Nobody wants her job.
And nothing can ever happen to her because no one knows how to do her job.
Yeah, we're going to have to take some insurance out of the law.
Yeah, that's some incredible coordination there.
It is.
How many community concert associations are you guys working with at this point?
I would say right now we probably market to about
120.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And when I say market to, that means that sometimes they don't book everything through us. They say, okay, I'm going to pick one or two from you guys, and then we just do local stuff after that. But then we have some where we do their whole season.
Okay.
And that means, of course, like going back to what we were talking about earlier, that number has definitely decreased. And we've seen it quite a bit since the pandemic, which is pretty expected and pretty normal. I mean, I hate to say that it's normal, but it is.
But what is really interesting about that, though, is a lot of it wasn't because they sick or died. It's leadership. Mm-hmm. People, it's like, well, I don't want to do it anymore. And nobody wants to take over.
Yeah, so. That's board succession planning has been
very tough.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very challenging for us. You know, I had one on the East Coast that closed, and this one really got me. They had 700 to 800 current subscribers coming, and the guy was 80-something years old, and he's like, I just can't do it anymore. I said, well, you've got to get somebody. Nobody would step up. So you talk about a hole right there.
Just left in right in the middle of the community.
And the ones that are doing the best, I would say, are probably the ones that have incorporated a lot of like younger people on their boards, even bringing in some situations, like students in the community, just like as a youth perspective, a youth voice on this board. Several of the Texas towns have done that, and they're very successful because of it. But it's creating a makeup of what your community looks like.
Yeah, I think that's key, because it's not necessarily just the age thing or what, because sometimes you might bring in somebody, they have the wrong ideas or whatever. But what Erika just said there is, does your board reflect your community?
Now, do you talk to the associations about succession planning and about
absolutely? It's all in our strategic plans. Absolutely.
Okay.
We have all that in a document about how to address that, how to start the conversation, because our belief system is in any kind of board that you need somebody, it's kind of like your second string. Somebody should be knowing exactly what you do, because, and this has happened, there was one town I had that it was the treasurer, had everything on his laptop and all the knowledge, and they just let him do whatever. He had a stroke. Nobody could get into anything. It took months and months and months for them to even get into, working with their finances again.
Yeah.
So it's all about building a board. I was in a small town. Well, a lot of times when I go into a town for the first time, before I meet with the board, I'll drive around, kind of get the lay of the land, kind of maybe talk to some people, see what's going on. And then when I meet the board, did that reflect what I just saw? And I hear nobody comes, nobody wants to come. We have, a big Latino group in our town, and they won't come, and I don't see anybody that would represent them on your board. And that's what it is. Whoever you are targeting, whether it's a demographic,
age,
ethnic, whatever, they need to be on your board.
They need a seat at the table.
Yes, absolutely.
This is stuff that we talk about too. In fact, I can't believe we forgot to mention this earlier at our national conference. Historically, we've held our own national conference in Nashville, Tennessee. For 2 or 3 years, we did an online conference because of the pandemic. But beyond those years, it's always been an in-person event where we bring all of the artists that are on the roster to Nashville to showcase them like you would at any conference setting. They get a 15-minute showcase. All of the representatives from the community concert associations fly in to watch their showcases. Because as we all learned very, very quickly, and during the pandemic, this is a live performance industry. So watching a video can be very, very different than seeing an artist perform live and seeing how they interact on stage. But during those conferences, we also hold workshops. And this has been something that's been discussed and talked about in several workshop sessions. A couple of years ago, we actually decided to change the format of how we do our workshops to more of a roundtable conversation versus instead of us talking at them and saying, you should do this, you should do this, we really encouraged all of them to sit with people from other concert associations to talk about what they've tried, what worked, what didn't work, what their biggest issues are, because they're all going through the same thing. As an industry, we're all facing the same challenges right now. And the best way to figure out solutions to those is to have conversations with each other. And in the past, that hasn't really been a thing that was encouraged during these workshop sessions, but we really wanted to change that and create a market-wide, industry-wide conversation amongst the community concert association market to try and figure out solutions to all the things, the challenges that they're facing. And board succession planning and strategic planning has very much so been a huge topic of conversation in all of those workshop sessions.
So it's kind of taking our own medicine. Okay, we've been doing this where we've been preaching to them and telling them what to do. Some are adopting, some are not. We've got to retool this, and so far that's been probably the best ones I think.
We've gotten fantastic
and less work
feedback
on us because it's them coming up with their solutions.
Yeah,
we'll give you a topic. Y'all talk about it.
Whenever they feel like they're a part of it, they're so much more likely to take ownership of it and take it back to where they're at.
Exactly.
Well, and it gives them a chance to brag a little bit on their towns and their associations too. Yes,
they love that.
And they should. They should be proud of it. So giving them the mic and the opportunity to talk about the things that they've tried that worked really well. I mean, Marshalltown and Iowa is a fantastic example of that. They had this professionally produced video, promotional video that they created about their new venue. I think it's at Marshalltown High School. And it was fantastic. And so after that, a lot of people from other towns across the country came up and, asked what the process was of, in terms of putting that together, how much it cost, and
because we can
you
tell
get a grant
them to do
for that?
it, but it's like, well, yeah, I don't think it'll work. But then when
You see success.
I guess it will work because they're doing it. It's working. Why can't you do it? What's different? Because they're doing it.
The next avenue of the business is live arts and attractions.
Yes.
And when did that come about? And is that part of you guys filling out the schedule for Live on Stage, or is it something really completely separate and insular?
After becoming a rep and doing the rep thing for a while, and then coming more into more APAPs and everything, and we know so many agents because we work with them. We were taking artists in and getting artists, some that weren't even represented. And we do a really good job at helping the artists build a marketing package because we have to for Live on Stage. And we start to see trends, things that we know that'll work in our market, but they also work in the other markets as well. But we can only use that artist for one season because every year we are changing out. So when they get this package together, they get the show nailed down, whether we've helped them or not, we were giving them away to other agents. Like, wow, thanks, I got it from here. And the idea was, why don't we start our own agency? And
if you're curating the talent and curating their assets,
giving it away,
giving away business.
So we stepped back and said, well, we don't have experience in that market, so let's So we brought somebody on, and that was in 2016, and that's where Live Arts and Attractions kind of started. But then that agent left. We were kind of left to kind of retool, but this was right before COVID, and this is where Erika comes in. So you want to tell that story?
Yeah, it's really funny. We come back from Christmas break. We've got about a week and a half until APAP, and they're like, we need help. We need someone can you come to New York with us? So APAP was like my baptism by fire into this industry. I had no idea what was going on, but I was here. I was helping. We got through that conference. We knew we were going to have to kind of reconfigure some things after. So we kind of rebuilt the roster, and we really wanted to focus on rebranding the agency itself and start associating our names and our faces with this company. And so over the next year or so, we spent so much time, money, effort on just the marketing of the agency itself, curating a new roster of artists, getting the exposure that we needed, which, and that's where Live on Stage has really helped us a lot because we already had these relationships with other agents and artists in the community and in the industry that really gave us some validation, I think, and some credibility amongst presenters. So for that year, we spent a lot of time just focusing on the rebranding and the exposure of it all. And then we did a really good first year on the conference circuit, and then the world shut down.
That was 2019.
So that was
and then we went and think, we've really built something here. And then we got invited when they would do the in person to the Florida Presenters. That's an invitation only where you come down. And I remember we were on the beach in like February. Yep. It was you, me, and Lou. Our vice president, Lou Spoltori. And we're like, wow, it doesn't get any better than this. And then Eric and I were at the bar or whatever that night, and I was because I think it was Matt or one of them had asked and said, do you think Erika would want to sell? And I was like, I don't know. She hadn't really said anything about selling. So I remember I asked you, I was like, hey, so Erika, what if, it comes a time we have to bring on somebody to sell? I mean, how would you feel about that?
Yes. Like, I've been waiting on that. Honestly, it was really funny. But the irony of that, too, is we had this conversation. We had a game plan. We're like, okay, that's great. And then, on our trip home, we're in the airport. It's the first time you start seeing people in their masks and sanitizing everything. And I mean, the following Wednesday, Matt closed the office, and
it was crazy after that
for a while.
COVID.
Yeah.
But I think that through COVID, we all grew a lot. I think everybody grew.
Well, everybody tried to stay touch with each other as much as possible, through the NAPAMA webinars, the APAP webinars, everything. And so that it's funny, that actually I think helped in some ways build our relationships with other people and especially presenters. Because we got to meet people through that avenue that we wouldn't have gotten FaceTime with probably for another couple of years. And then coming out of the pandemic, you saw a lot of turnover in the industry, whether it's, the agents that work for various agencies. Some agencies, merged with others, some folded entirely. Presenting venues, you saw a ton of turnover, which benefited us because we were the new kids on the block. So we weren't fighting quite as much of an uphill battle in terms of getting presenters to talk to us. But something that Mark and I talked quite a bit about in the development of how we wanted live arts and attractions to look and operate was that we really spent a lot of time, I would say probably 2 to 3 years, focusing on building our relationships with other agencies, other artists, the service organizations first, and then turning our focus to really building our relationships with the presenters, because through these other artists and through these agents, they've made introductions to presenters. Yes. They've really helped create a really good foundation for us in this industry and a really strong network of people and resources that's been incredibly beneficial as a fairly new agency, especially if you eliminate the 2 to 3 years of, the pandemic. We're technically speaking probably only 4 5 years old.
Yeah, I mean, really.
So that's been incredibly important.
And having that time during the pandemic to grow those further relationships and grow that network without the pressure of sales
Absolutely.
as heavily, and without the pressure of producing as heavily, producing sales, producing content, producing everything for the for the concert associations, really gave you time to bear into relationships.
Yes, absolutely.
Sure, absolutely. And I think that was a big part of how our roster went after that, because it took a big turn. We stayed in contact with quite a few artists, and there were still a handful of artists that are on our roster now that's where we got them. It was through that, like, how do we work with you? Because we would always hear that, after they would do a live on stage tour. How do we work with you guys again? So
funny, you should ask.
So we were thinking, wow, we've really got a cohesive team here. And at the time, the core team was just Erika, myself, and Laura, and we were the trio to make everything happen.
With both live on stage and
live
arts.
And then recently, Joey comes on board, and we kind of call ourselves the core four now. Yeah. He was the missing piece we didn't know we didn't have.
Absolutely. It's been, with live on stage, everything is so cyclical. Everything happens pretty much at the exact same time every year. We know what needs to happen. We've kind of had to deal with every form of emergency you could possibly imagine with all these. I mean, you're working with 20, 25 artists. They're on national tours. You deal with snow. Especially after the pandemic, all those concert cancellations. So an entire half of a season.
Yeah.
So the experience that we learned from all of that and the knowledge that we all have now, because everybody does serve in a very specific role and has very specific responsibilities, but we know exactly when they have to happen. LAA has been a little bit more fluid in terms of the development of it, just because it's a different side of the business, but they also overlap quite a bit, because a lot of the times we'll have 1 or 2 LAA artists that are touring through live on stage. And so the balance, in fact, we have that this upcoming year. Yeah, we've got 3 artists that are touring. They're going to be touring for live on stage in 25, 26. So trying to balance, deal with the radius clause issues, because they're performing for a community concert association over here, but we want to fill in their tour. But what's this Performing Arts Center's radius clause? And are you pulling the same demographic from the community? Is there going to be a conflict? It's a lot of moving pieces. But yeah, with the team that we've got assembled, it's been fantastic. And you're right. I mean, Joey coming in was a game changer for us.
Yeah, and just recently, where there was that big storm that was going through the whole country or whatever, we get a call from Texas, from a town that a show was coming up just right outside of Dallas. And I was in the office with Laura, and Laura's like, let's just give it to Joey. Like, he hasn't really handled that yet, but within two days, we had the thing canceled and rescheduled like that. Mm-hmm. And it was like, and we didn't, wow, okay. we're really moving and all. We're firing on all cylinders now.
Yeah, that's
because we
great.
didn't have to stop what we were doing to jump in and try to figure that out.
Yeah.
You know, is the artist available? Is the venue available?
And especially with you guys at that point prepping to come to APAP.
Absolutely, absolutely,
and being completely overwhelmed with
Everything.
travel arrangements and the incoming weather for yourselves with travel and trying to get that done.
Yeah.
So that's really wonderful.
Yeah. And on a side note, Erica's also a part-time weather girl.
I am. I can always
our
I
staff
can
meteorologist.
always tell you what the forecast is.
Absolutely.
I like religiously check my weather app.
It's been wonderful to hear where you guys have come from, how it's all built, how it's all come together. What can we see coming forward in the future?
So actually about a year and a half ago, Matt and Lou sat down with Craig Hankinson, who's been, like a figurehead basically in this industry and an incredibly important voice and presence in this industry for 40 plus years, and was having a conversation with him about the future of Producers Inc. And they made the decision that Live Arts and Attractions would acquire Producers Inc. So when that happened, we gained this fantastic team in Craig, Kathy, Milt, and KC. That are fantastic resources. Again, I mean, this is a 40-year-old company, and when you're looking at LAA, that's, yes, we're radically different companies in terms of the makeup and the structure and the way that things have operated. Of course we are, because it's a 40-year-old company versus a 5-year-old company. But the industry knowledge and the connections and stuff has been incredibly valuable. And moving forward with all of that, it's going to be interesting to see, how it develops, how everything pans out. But yeah, we have a fantastic working relationship with them. We're very excited to work with them in a new capacity. So now I guess technically Matt owns 4 companies, right?
Right.
So that's exciting. Kind of one big family now.
It is, and Matt and Craig go way back. So Craig, I think at one point was kind of a mentor to Matt. So there's always that respect. And even when I first started here, just my first year or two meeting Craig, because we would of course put some of his artists on live on stage, he always had time for anybody and everybody. And here I was, didn't know anything, but he would tell me stories, and this guy's got some stories, because it's been like 45 years just of Producers Inc. He had a whole career before that, which is amazing. Yeah. Amazing. So it's kind of neat how things have kind of come full circle. Yeah. And even though they're still operating as Producers Inc., it is under the Live Arts and Attractions umbrella.
I think the whole goal and the priority was, of course, to protect and preserve and
absolutely,
Craig's legacy and the Producers Inc. legacy, because he has built just this incredibly powerful agency and that's left a very lasting imprint on the industry as a whole. So the preservation of that organization has definitely been a big priority for everybody that's involved, especially Craig, of course. I mean, it's his legacy.
And they have some of those iconic artists too, like the Glenn Miller Orchestra, the Diamonds. So you have that brand over here that's servicing that market, where we're over on the other side trying to create new experiences. So it's very symbiotic, very harmonious. It is.
Well, we look forward to seeing where that goes and where that plays out. Thank you for talking us through all of this today, because it's such an interesting organization with all of the different avenues of it and how it all works together and plays together. So thanks for your time today. Thanks for being with us here on There's No Business Like.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Josh, thanks so much for bringing Erika and Mark to the podcast. This was a fascinating conversation. I have not worked with them in terms of booking or with them as an agency, and so I did not know all of the different things that they do, and particularly the conversation about the community concert associations. I actually looked up the history behind that sort of avenue of programming, and it's a fascinating history. And from a community engagement perspective, is brilliant. And so I really loved learning more about that.
I knew some of the history. I mean, I knew most of it, like the highlight view of it, but I never realized how much just Mark and Erika do themselves for all, knowing how much work that all is. And it's just primarily the 3 of them, that just blew my mind.
Yeah, no, that was actually an absolutely fascinating part of the conversation. And shout out to Marshalltown, Iowa again. Not only a great community concert association, they also have a fantastic public art group that does some very incredible things as well. So art begets art.
One of the things that I found really interesting was that they take all of the tech writers from everything that they're including into the live on stage roster each time, and they streamline those into the same format so that everybody you don't have to know how to dissect and read a tech writer as much, because everything will be in the exact same layout format, and everything's been agreed to for the entire run with Live on Stage. And just the way they streamline that to make it easier and more accessible for people without full-time tech directors as part of their package.
Well, and I think the whole history of it, starting in the, the 20s and 30s, all the way to this current moment, and what Live on Stage does to make it easier for these associations to continue presenting artists, is really a history of the democratization of the arts and removing barriers to access from very early on in kind of the live performing arts industry history. And I didn't really know much about this at all. But it just really struck me that, like, from the very beginning, the whole point was to make arts accessible in smaller communities, and building out the structure that originally was there, sort of like here's how you do this, walking in the door with sort of like a manual of how to put this together. All of that really at its core is about removing barriers to access to the arts in smaller communities.
Additionally, the reciprocal attendance from one community's concert series to the other really allows them to expand what they're doing without any additional cost to that specific concert series. And I think that's a really cool aspect of it as well.
And I do like the fact that you kind of dug into the idea of booking a season, and how a lot of people are changing that model and that subscription model to what you talked about, Josh. And I know we'll have more conversations about that down the road, but that is something that's pretty current.
Yeah, I thought it was really fascinating when Mark was talking about the venue, that like when you bought a season ticket, you had like 80 performances you could go to. I was like, oh my gosh, like that's insane. But also, from the standpoint of somebody who like really does love going and seeing shows and experiencing that, like how cool to buy one ticket for 80 things.
I do have to answer Mark's question though, because at some point I don't remember what age he said, but who under the age of 70 is sending in a check? And we all know Katie Miller still sends in checks.
It's the only way she pays
70.
for things.
Yeah.
So
she doesn't even own a debit card or a credit card.
That's
yes,
right.
I do. Although, yes, I do carry a checkbook. I also loved their conversation about sort of working with boards and volunteerism, the board training, and sort of how do you stack your boards with younger talent in particular to help with transition planning and longevity of these organizations. I think that's really important for literally all of our nonprofit performing arts orgs to be thinking about those things. And Kevin, I know you have a lot of thoughts on sort of board stability and that sort of thing, but I went and looked up volunteerism rates because this is something I think about a lot from coming out of the pandemic and sort of this very individualistic society that we live in, where it's me first all the time. And this model is very collective in nature, right? And thankfully, the short version of this is that volunteerism in the US has actually rebounded since the pandemic, and more people are volunteering than pre-pandemic, which is fantastic, but they are volunteering their time in shorter blocks. So while more people are volunteering, each individual is actually volunteering less time. So a commitment like to a board of a community concert association that's a huge commitment of time, right? So really trying to finesse those people, find the right ones, and get those long-term commitments is still going to be a challenge moving forward.
Yeah, I think volunteering in general is getting to be more challenging. I mean, as we move on to people who have to have like multiple jobs, and we're into like 2 income families when you used to be able to operate on one. I mean, it becomes more and more difficult to do that. I mean, we're seeing volunteers in our organization, or really every organization that I've been involved with, is also primarily older. And some people like to talk about like, oh, it's because, the young kids don't want to get out and volunteer. And the reality is like, those young kids have to have full-time jobs, and sometimes have to have more than one full-time job.
A lot of them are raising families and have that responsibility on top of their full-time jobs and everything.
Yeah,
it's been a problem for a long time. But it's funny you mentioned that volunteerism is up because actually we just had a meeting in Kingston, New York, about how the numbers are way down, and it's not just for our types of boards and organizations, but which is down also, but also ambulance corps and volunteer firefighters and all of those types of volunteers are actually going down in our area anyway. And people are ringing bells and alarms because they don't know how to do it, because it's getting harder to find people to fill those those needed things in the community.
Well, it's also interesting. The data shows that one of the groups that is volunteering more that has made gains is millennials ages 27 to 42. The studies also show, though, that people want to or are able to volunteer more of their time when they can do so digitally. So I think that's an interesting thing for arts organizations to think about in terms of like, how can we utilize volunteer hours to help with social media or developing marketing materials or doing online fundraising campaigns or whatever that might look like. But people can do things late at night at home on their computers versus showing up in person all the time, because there are always time conflicts, right? With kids' schedules or with work or supporting parents, whatever that looks like. So how can we utilize people's inclination to volunteer digitally more so to help maybe with some functions we haven't thought about before?
Yeah, that's interesting, Katie. I've never really considered like digital volunteering.
And again, that works for boards. I mean, our board does meet digitally already on Zoom, but well, it's hybrid. People are welcome to come in person if they'd like to. But again, I look at other organizations like you can't do that for the firefighters. You need to show up to the fire. You can't just be on a Zoom and say, "Hey,
robots.
Get your hose."
We're like remote control robots. Oh, I'm totally into that.
There's the answer, Kevin. All right, you just stumbled upon it accidentally.
Excuse me, remote control firemen.
There it is. We just need more robots that people can control with game controllers. Just to go back to the board issue, I think that's a great idea to try to make it more virtual, Katie, but it was kind of disheartening too, the fact that there were communities that Mark and his company were serving that just, unfortunately, the organization went away because they didn't have anybody to step up, or the person that had been doing it over and over and over again because no one would step up eventually couldn't physically do it anymore. And so it's just really, my heart goes out to those communities for losing those organizations. And that's what happens when nobody is able to do it. So we do need to find better ways that people can serve. And I think virtual is part of the solution, but you still need people to roll up sleeves and do things in the community. And so virtual is part of the answer, but I think we need to find ways to allow people, I know when I was coming up, when I was a young lad, fresh out of college, and I had a job, I had a supervisor when I was at the marketing agency, Nikki Jones. She actually would tell me, go sign up for Rotary. And she would give me time off during the day from my work in the office to go and do things for Rotary. And because it was important, and being a young professional and getting involved in that kind of organization, and just making space within the day, not adding it on to my day, was a big help. And I think a lot of people now, because we've downsized a lot of organizations, there's more, we're doing more with less. And there's just not enough time to allow people to do that sometimes. And I think that's part of the problem too, is we're not empowering the younger folks can do it if we make room for it.
Right. Well, and I think also designating a specific seat or seats on your board for teenagers and young professionals helps, right? So first of all, it just creates that space. And the second of all, it says to the people you're asking to come onto the board, like, we value you. Right. And you are going to have an actual voice in these conversations, and your input is valued. So I know there are several nonprofits in my community that have specifically designated seats on boards for those age groups in particular. And it helps when they know that they're actually going to be a part of the conversation and they're valued, and not just going to show up and never have a chance to talk or offer their opinion or do actual work.
In regards to like the Community Concert Association aspect of this, I don't know that I don't have a solution on this, and I don't know, maybe this doesn't make the cut here. But what I am curious about is how much of those things going away have to do with a change in taste and a change in desire and a change in what people want to see. I mean, because when you look at a lot of what these community concert associations and those things are bringing in, they tend to be, more not always chamber music, but sometimes like chamber groups, single soloist, maybe a like indie folk duo. But what we're seeing from like a younger demographic is like they're buying tickets to things that are very different in nature. And so is there a way to,
I'm going to push back on you, Kevin, if I can, just because my last 7 years I was at a college working with young people. And believe me, there are people that are that are young college age people that are very much into classical music, that are very much into chamber music. And I think that you're only making the case that why it's important to have them on these boards, because they're going to be able to help bring fresh perspectives about those types. You got to find the individuals that are excited about those things. And then, but I think some of the hurdles are the ones we were talking about. Those folks are not able to take time off of work to volunteer for those things because they're struggling to make their rent and to put food on the table. They're, having all kinds of other challenges right now.
Do you think that the reason that you had so many students that were interested in those classical music and different things is because you were at a university versus like a smaller community that might not have the concentration of those folks?
That's what I'm saying. They came to the university because we had those programs. They were already interested in it from wherever they came from to come study that and be part of that and go out. And it wasn't just like they wanted to do the classics all the time. They were finding exciting things because part of the program was they had to be in different ensembles and groups, a lot of them student led, and they would program their own events and things and concerts. And so they were finding new ways to present this music and to interact and engage with this type of overall genre to make it new and exciting. I look at Samara Joy in the jazz world doing the same kind of thing. She's 25 years old and lighting it up with all the classic jazz, repertoire. And so it's not so much, I think, the legacy of these types of genres. I think it's more getting the opportunities for the young people to be able to get into these leadership roles and to have a say and to have some input into, what direction because I think your point is these old community groups are just kind of stale and getting into the same cookie cutter approach of just, spitting it out year after year after year, instead of having some kind of new, fresh infusion of different thoughts and ideas of how they do it, how they approach, how they program. And I don't know. It's not that I have
Brian,
the answers, but
no, I actually think you were spot on. Like, I think I had a little bit of short-sightedness there that you were right. Like, it's like, yes, tastes are changing, but we need to have that younger demographic to be able to sort of like start programming in some of those changes, because you're right. Like, maybe some of these the community concert associations are going away, but like, how many students at campuses or students that do we see that are doing like house concerts and are doing, pop-up shows at the local bars? Like, it's sort of the same thing, just, at like a different demographic.
And it's important we're not putting them all in the same umbrella. Just because they're young doesn't mean that they're going to be right to lead that organization.
Oh, absolutely.
And just like, when we kind of tokenize anybody that way, it's not going to work just because we're focusing on, there's a young person, let's get them in. You have to find someone who's got the fire in their belly for that type of work and be young and get them in there.
Yeah,
I know I've done a lot of talking already, but I just want to also give a shout out to, they mentioned how Producers Inc. is now under their umbrella, which I think is really exciting. I met Milt Orkin at my very first APAP, and he was one of those people that I had to go up to. I talked about how Martha Woods challenged me to say hi to 10 people. He was literally the first person I talked to and was just so inviting and so welcoming and saying, and he introduced me to people, and he still to this day connects me to people and says, have you met this person, Brian, or, connecting me with people. So I think that's a great organization, and you're getting great people there at Producers Inc., adding on to this great umbrella of live arts and attractions. So.
Well, thank you all for sitting down, talking about Matt Davenport Productions, Live Arts and Attractions, and Live on Stage. Thank you to Mark and Erika for sitting down with me at APAP this year and really kind of diving into the heart of your business. We really look forward to seeing what comes of the partnership with Producers Inc. and how all that moves forward. So we'll see you again next time here at There's No Business Like.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to There's No Business Like. Our producers and hosts are Brian Zelmer, Josh Benson, Kevin Maynard, Katie Miller, and me, Danielle Van Hook. Views expressed in this podcast are ours alone and are not reflective of the organizations we are a part of. Keep up with us at nobusinesslike.com. There you'll find links to all of our episodes and socials. If you like this podcast, give us a like, a follow, a review, or our favorite, a 5-star rating. Oh wait, what was that site? I got it, don't worry. It is nobusinesslike.com. Do I sound out bus-I-ness every time I type it? Yep, sure do. Stay in touch, my friends.
All right, let's do this.
Are you starting this? Go ahead and
Josh
start
is.
it, Katie.
Josh is
Josh
hosting.
yeah.
I mean, just because he did the interview doesn't mean he has to host.
That's
Kick
a
it
good
off.
point. We're
That's
changing
not
everything.
the way we do things around here.
We're changing everything.
Remember, we don't have to follow. It's our podcast. Do what we want. All right, Katie, go.
No.
You know what we could do? We've never done this.
All
we
right.
could all host it, but we each say one sentence and pass it on.
Ooh,
Okay.
Just keep
what
going
if we
around
what
and
if we all
around.
just did it at the same time?
Yes.
Okay, ready? I'm
One,
gonna do
On the
countdown.
clap.
3.
Thank you all for
Welcome
joining
back,
us.
Welcome back to There's No Business Like.
This is
Fuck all
Brian
of you.
Zelmer, and I'm here with my friends.
Wait, what?
Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome back to There's No Business Like.
Hello and welcome back to There's No Business Like.
Hello, and welcome back to There's No Business Like.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back to There's No Business Like.
I want to thank Erika for not tasing me.
I'm kind of disappointed in that.
Oh man.